your tire. Once you lift the car on the jack, you'll lose the natural resistance you need to remove these lug nuts, so you need to get them started now. Don't remove the lug nuts entirely until later. Next, position the floor jack underneath your car. Consult your owner's manual to find where it is safe to jack the car up. You can severely damage your car if you use a jack on an unsafe or unstable part of your car. Once you've identified your safe jack points, lift the car high enough to place a jack stand underneath it. Your jack stand should also be placed on a safe structural location underneath your car. Never work underneath a car that is solely supported by a jack. Once the jack stand is positioned correctly, lower the car onto the jack stand and remove the floor jack. Now you can finish removing the lug nuts from your tire. Set these aside in a safe place where you won't lose them. Next, remove your tire and set it aside as well. Now you should be able to see your rotor and brake caliper assembly. There are two bolts located at the top and bottom of the interior side of the caliper assembly. Using a socket wrench, remove these bolts. At this point, you can remove the caliper assembly from the rotor, revealing the brake pads. Note, the caliper will still be attached to the brake line. Do not let the caliper assembly hang from this line. If you're not replacing your rotors, you can lay the assembly on top of the rotor. Now that you can see the brake pads, carefully remove them from the rotor. Be careful during this step not to scratch or damage the rotor itself. This is also a good time to take a measurement of the thickness of your rotor. Your owner's manual should tell you the minimum thickness for your rotor to operate safely. As you remove the brake pads, be mindful of the clips that hold them in place. If any of these have been damaged, you can install the replacement clips that usually come in the box with your new brake pads. Before you install your new brake pads, you'll want to apply some brake grease to the back of the pads. This helps prevent squealing and squeaking during normal operation. For this step, wear protective gloves to prevent the grease from getting on your skin. Apply the brake grease to the metal plates on the backs of the pads. Do not allow any grease to get on the front of the pads or on the rotors directly. Your brakes are designed to generate enough friction to stop your vehicle. Getting grease on your brake pads will accomplish the opposite effect, and your brakes may not function correctly. Squeeze a bit of grease either onto your gloved fingers or onto the backs of the brake pads directly. Use your fingers to spread the brake grease across the plates on the backs of your brake pads to create a smooth, even lubrication layer. Repeat this process for both brake pads that you're replacing. Next, replace the brake pads in the same orientation as the ones you removed previously. Some replacement brake pads come with clips pre-installed, but you may need to add them yourself. Once again, be careful during this step to avoid getting any grease on the rotors. Now, you'll need to adjust the caliper assembly to fit the new, thicker brake pads. To do this, insert one of the old brake pads inside the caliper assembly against the large circular piston. Next, insert the brake tool and adjust it until it is taut between the caliper's clamps. Rotate the brake tool's handle until the piston has been fully pressed back into the caliper assembly. Now the piston assembly should fit over the brake pads you've just replaced. You may also need to adjust the pins where you insert the caliper bolts to line up properly as well. Once the caliper assembly is back in place, insert the bolts and hand tighten them to keep them snug. Next, come back with a socket wrench to tighten them entirely. You can now replace your tire on top of the wheel assembly and hand tighten the lug nuts to keep them in place. Once your tire is secure, place the jack underneath your vehicle again and lift it high enough to remove your jack stand. Remove the jack stand from underneath your vehicle and lower your car